Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. This is our latest installment of our Musician Monday, promoted by the Musician Treatment Foundation. And I have the great honor and privilege and pleasure of introducing my longtime friend of 17 years, Peggy Stern. She's an amazing jazz pianist and just extraordinarily talented person who I've been grateful to get to know. Unfortunately, got to know her through some orthopedic issues, which we'll discuss. But Peggy, please welcome, first of all, thank you in the midst of this pandemic that we still get to be a little bit close enough to bond, keep the bond going. And please introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about all the many activities you've done and continue to contribute to the music world and our pleasure so frequently.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. This is really a worthy and necessary cause that you've embraced, and we're all very grateful. I've been a pianist all my life since I'm 5 years old, but since I've been a professional since my mid-20s, I've done a number of things. Obviously, musicians have to wear a lot of hats in order to keep things going, and so I've taught, I've played in churches, and I've run several different jazz choirs in DC and in New York, and most recently here in Austin, but unfortunately no singing allowed during the pandemic, so that is on hiatus until we're all vaccinated. The other thing that I do besides play the piano and absorb all the different styles of music that come my way that I'm attracted to, I began a festival back in New York called the Wall Street Jazz Festival, and we had that for 12 years in Kingston, New York. Then we moved it down here when I moved down here, and it became Lulu Fest. We're currently in our 5th year, and this year will be a retrospective of the last 17 years that the festival has been in existence.
That's amazing, and I've attended that, and we support it through the Musician Treatment Foundation. It's an amazing nonprofit. And in 2 sentences, what is the goal of Lulu Fest?
Lulu Fest is a festival where the traditions meet the progressives, and all the band leaders are women.
There you go. That's what I wanted to hear. All the band leaders are women, which is super cool and super important. So thank you. Real fast, for the viewers, please, let's take off our masks briefly just so they can see your beautiful smile and countenance. And so we'll put them back on in good obedience to viral protocols. But in any case, let's move on. So I met you 17 years ago, and you were having some thumb trouble, which, if anybody knows anything about music, thumbs are all important. They're not just important for tying our shoes, but they're also important for, critically important for musicians, especially pianists. So tell me what was going on back then.
Well, I was in excruciating pain. It was my left hand first, where I couldn't even open a door or a jar, much less play the piano. Now, I had spent years as a salsa pianist, and that involves playing montunos, and it's very heavy on the thumbs. So I'm certain that had that. And as you said at the time, it's bad luck.
Yes.
And also overuse.
Yes.
Yeah. And I remember Doc said at the time, he said, well, there's good news and there's bad news. You're not going to remember this, but you said, the bad news is, I'll give it to you first, it's going to happen in your right hand as well in about 2 years. The good news is you're never going to have arthritis in the rest of your fingers.
Yeah.
And this has turned out to be true. Precisely 2 years later, started in my right hand. We did the second surgery back then, and it's given me a new life. It's a little bit truncated. There's certain things that Thumbkin doesn't want to do.
So you are the least capable thumb wrestler of anybody that you know?
I don't know.
No, you're pretty
You
good?
wanna try me?
Pretty good? Okay, later.
Okay.
You know, the basal joint of the thumb, which is what we were talking about, is our opposable thumb joint. It's the joint that that allows us to do so much and be higher primates. And it wears out prematurely in about 50% of people. Not everybody has symptoms, but musicians are more likely, as Peggy fully attests, to have symptoms than most of the rest of us. And yeah, it does not imply that you'll get it as you have beautiful hands and they move super well and they don't have any evidence of arthritis there. So one of the most important things for me as when I'm treating musicians who come in with these problems is I know what the end game is. I know where they're headed, but I also know that you have livelihoods and so many musicians are living gig to gig and show to show, and they're most are freelance. And so any period of time that it takes to recover from a reconstructive thumb surgery is just almost impossible to imagine. So how did that feel to you, and how did you ever come about? I remember discussing it with you, but how did you work out the time to actually have reconstructive surgery where you're going to be out for 2 or 3 months?
Well, that was extremely difficult, and it was about 3 months that first time. It was about 3 months before I could play again. But it's interesting. You work out ways. Like I still had, once I got rid of that cast, I still had 4 fingers to work with. You'd be amazed at how it's like a dog that is missing a leg works out a way to have a perfectly decent life. So it's kind of unthinkable to not play for 3 months, not only financially, but just for the well-being of a musician. You can't really do that.
And I've mentioned that before, is musicians are so unique in that music is a universal language, right? And it spans all cultures and breaks down all barriers. But it is so important for us non-musicians to experience it and to derive such immense pleasure and joy from it. And emotional tranquility and peace and meditation and all other emotions that we gather from all of you who imbue the world with this special gift. But you also get a personal psychological lift. I know this from studies and from my experience treating thousands of musicians.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about what it feels like when you cannot play.
Well, it's hard to describe. That's a really good question. There's really never been a time when I cannot play. There's always a way around it to play. If you think about, I'm forgetting the name of the classical pianist who lost the use
Leon
of
Fleischer.
Leon Fleischer lost his right hand completely. And ended up playing the concerto for left hand by Ravel, was it? And so it's physical. It's actually a physical well-being. I notice if I don't play for a few days, even for a few days, that I physically miss it. It's like when I get to the piano and play, as my breathing changes, my thought processes change, and it's completely nourishing. That's all I can say, and it's all I remember because I've been doing it since I'm 4 or 5 years old.
And what's super cool about jazz, I know you play many different genres, but about a lot of what you do, because I've sat with you and heard you play, so much is improvisational. And that specifically, improvisational music is one of the most brain stimulating and dopaminergic releasing, which is a mood elevating a neurotransmitter in our brains. Charles Limb did an amazing study looking at the brain waves of jazz musicians improvising specifically. If they were playing a specific piece by rote, that didn't stimulate the brain. It's the improv that really stimulates that. So that's super cool. And do you have this feeling of elation and this feeling of like after you hit just that right sequence and you know, oh, wait, this is something that I'm going to repeat. This is something I'm going to record. This is something, what does it feel like?
Well, now that's a long answer. So let me try and condense it. For me, Well, you're at a piano, so there's a lot of, you're pushing buttons. You can do that. And this is what I teach pianists not to do. You don't just push buttons, because we can all do that. But when you play something and you're improvising and you get into the zone, you call it the zone, and it's just coming through you, out your fingers into the instrument, and it's the truth.
Yeah, yeah.
So that feels great.
Yeah.
And we're always searching for that.
Yeah.
That's why improvising jazz musicians are the best people on the planet, because we're looking for the truth all the time.
I've never heard anybody refer to it as the truth, but I love that phrasing and that thought. Will you play something for us?
Sure.
We really need to experience this firsthand. We can talk about it all we want, but hearing you play is so beautiful. So please, let's hear you play something.
Okay.
The name of this tune is Lila. It was written for a baby that was born in New York City at the time it was written.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. And we'll hear more in a minute, but I want to talk a little more. First, though, as if we're on a Delta or JetBlue flight, which is what I fly every week, let's have a little bit of wine.
Cheers.
Cheers. Okay. So, obviously we're in the middle of a pandemic. Otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here with masks. And, I've, in all the times that we've had these Musician Mondays, one of the things I wanted to discuss with my friends is the impact of COVID specifically on, we know how it's impacted the world. We know that, and we hope that as few people as possible are impacted in terms of the health and well-being of their family and friends. But for music in particular, live music has been decimated. Amazing facilities like the Parker Jazz Club here in Austin have become almost radio silent. And it's been devastating for the industry through this injurious and terrible pandemic. So we talked a little bit already about how amazing it is and important for you to keep making music. But you can make music at home on your piano, on your keyboard, on your this or your that. But so much of what you do is a reflection of the people that are watching you and their response to you and so forth. So what has been the impact of having less and less? And you've done so much choral jazz chorus work and so forth, where the interaction is so important. I've been there and watched you. It's amazing, the dynamic and the interplay. How do you get through that? How do you alter your brain and your heart to get through now well more than a year pandemic where live music and this deep personal interaction is shut down?
Gosh, I'm gonna cry. No.
Yeah.
It's like everyone else, we're dealing with it. Now, as a pianist, I'm used to spending gobs of time by myself.
Okay.
Because that's when we were kids at Eastman, we all had these little cubicle practice rooms, and we would spend 8, 10, 11 hours a day in there.
Interesting.
So the solo time doesn't bother me. Right early on, I guess cheated, but I kept my Western swing band together, and so we are a pod. So I have that pod and my family pod, and those are the people I've seen for the last year.
Got it.
So we do get to play together and to learn new songs and like that. But I really miss my musical friends playing and learning. It feels like the world stopped spinning or something. It's a very strange feeling, but I think it's nothing different than what everyone else is experiencing. In terms of playing for an audience, the live streaming is a real departure for some of us, for me.
Yes.
So, and I can only speak for myself, so it's not a perfect substitute, but it's the best we can do. But sometimes I worry that we're all going to be screens. Everything that we do is going to be screened.
Right. I mean, it was already feeling a little like that in our technological world. And live music, especially in beautiful, intimate venues, was one of the few things that wasn't that. And that became that too.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. One of the things that we did, of course, now is the weather hasn't been conducive, but it looks like it might be again. We did lawn concerts and porch concerts, and the neighbors would come out and they would socially distance, and everybody has their mask, but they'd bring their chairs and sit down. And so grateful are they for live music that it worked for us. It's a little bit of a performance. It is a performance, and we're making people happy.
Yes.
So
there's
there's ways of just trying to get through it.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's amazing. And now all of our lifestyles were altered by the pandemic and the spending even more time alone. And you sustained an intra-COVID injury. Tell me about how that happened, and let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, I was hiking in the woods, and it just was one of those things. I do have a young dog and plenty of time for hiking, more time than I would like. And it keeps my mind in shape, as does my piano playing practice. And so I was hiking, I tripped over a rock and I fell wrong, and I knew right away it was wrong. I just knew right away I had done something nefarious to my poor little finger. I mean, I went from thumbs to finger.
Little fingers,
and so I immediately called Doc Dreamy, McDreamy, sorry, Doc McDreamy. And he so graciously came over and looked at it and said, well, that's a torn ligament. And
Yeah.
the rest is long
Yeah.
recovery.
So a relatively minor injury in the scope of all of our worlds and lives. But it's interesting when you fall this way, there are these small collateral ligaments that can tear if torqued just the right way, which is exactly what you did. And the problem is, yes, it's not a huge injury, but it's a very lingering and nerve-wracking and hand-altering injury, regardless of which finger it happens with. And for you have, you're petite, so already for you to reach octaves is probably...
No, I have a very fine octave.
Beautiful,
I have a ninth.
Beautiful. Wow.
But
she has a ninth. I just
and
want
now
everybody, I want
even,
this to be on record that she has a ninth with those
and
beautiful
even more
petite
now
hands.
that it's all stretched out
Right.
because it's broken.
So yes, once you tear the ligament, you get to a 10th sometimes, but no. The problem is that it continues to ache and not feel quite strong enough. And that's what you've been complaining about to me in your, your occasional text and our exams and our times together. And so slowly but surely it's improving.
It is improving.
Yeah, without surgery, by the way.
Without surgery. It is improving. I've noticed that it's starting to come around. But I've also noticed, which you'll see in this next piece that I play, my little finger is my bass player if I'm playing solo.
Yeah.
And this little guy doesn't have the strength that she had before. So I'm substituting.
Right.
Again, I'm substituting like I did with the thumb injury.
Yeah.
I find myself doing things with my fourth finger, which is already a weak digit. It's not great.
Okay. Well, so in the middle of playing, you don't yell out more bass, do you? You don't.
More cowbell.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for that reference. All right. So, well, this is awesome. I could talk to you all day, and I know you could talk music forever,
right.
And I would love to, but we want to respect our amazing listeners and viewers, but we will be back with Peggy Stern when we get the ability to do a little more live music. Peggy will be back and really performing, and it'll be amazing because as I said, I've heard her so many times and she's just amazing. And so with that, please accept our sincere gratitude for coming and sharing some of your personal experiences. And not all musicians want to talk about this. And so we really appreciate that. And we all learn so much from it. And, but most importantly, we want to hear more music. So please, thank you so much. I will see you soon, of course. But until then, let's end on a beautiful note, or many notes that are another piece for us.
Sure.
This tune was written back in 2007, and that was the point at which I was having problems with my thumbs, and it was Bone on Bone. So the name of the tune turned out to be Bone a Bone, which everyone thinks is some Spanish word that they never heard of before, and this has been a well-kept secret for a number of years. Bone a Bone.